Welcome back to ACS Global Forum. We're producing our next episode, trying to bring you information and insights from American Cancer Society and from our network of partners around the world. In this episode, we're going to be talking to a colleague of mine who heads up all of our volunteer management activities at American Cancer Society. Her name is Kathy Oakes, and I'm going to welcome her just now. Kathy, welcome. How are you?
Good morning, Matt. I'm well. How are you?
I'm very good indeed. Kathy, I'd love you just to give a little bit of a background of yourself, your backstory, your work at ACS, some information about yourself. And I also know that you're recently back from the National Volunteer Leadership Summit. So I'd love to hear a bit about that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me, first of all. So my name is Kathy Oakes. I'm the National Strategic Director for Volunteer Engagement here at the American Cancer Society. I actually just celebrated 19 years here with the ACS just a couple of weeks ago, actually. So I started with ACS fresh out of college, and I staffed many of our community Relay for Life events, some of our distinguished events, golf tournaments, different things like that. I did that for about 5 years, and then I went on to be what we called then our regional development director. So I was over all of the development staff in the Panhandle of Texas. I had 9 staff. We had, probably close to 45 or 50 Relay for Life events, and probably 5 to 10 gala events. I did that for a while. Then in 2013, the American Cancer Society went through our big transformation. And I served in our local community engagement role, where I was kind of the convener and the collaborator for all of our market activities here in Texas. And then in 2016, I was presented with a really unique opportunity to serve with our volunteer care team. So here at ACS, we do centralized onboarding for all of our volunteers. So there's one onboarding team that helps get all of our volunteers through any training or onboarding activities like background checks and application forms, things like that. So I did that. And then I was put into this position with our National Volunteer Engagement Department just about 3 or 4 years ago. So it's been a great move for me, but I have loved working for ACS, love working with volunteers. And so I'm super excited to be here to talk with you. Like you said, we just got done with our National Volunteer Leadership Summit. So this is a 3-day event where we bring in about 250 of our volunteers from across the country for really a 3-day event just to kind of kick off the year, really set our priorities and strategy for the year. So that was an amazing event. We had several wonderful speakers here from the American Cancer Society, as well as some external speakers. We do our national awards at that event. So we were able to present some awards to some really fantastic volunteers. And really, it was just an opportunity for all of our volunteers to network with each other, to share ideas and best practices, and really set the strategy for what they want to do in their local markets for the year ahead.
Awesome. Wow, that's super cool. And I know ACS has a massive, massive pool of volunteers, or a massive team of volunteers. So which volunteers were coming to this meeting specifically? Was it a variety or certain levels?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So ACS does have a little over 1.3 million volunteers,
Wow.
which we are so thrilled about. I always like to say volunteers of the American Cancer Society, I just work here. So they really are the heart of what we do. At our National Volunteer Leadership Summit, the volunteers were primarily the chair and co-chair of what we call an area board. So our largest markets, New York City, Los Angeles, Detroit, Dallas, they each have an area board. And so the volunteers that were in attendance at our meeting were the chair and the co-chair of that area board. And they're really charged with kind of operationalizing our national objectives at the local or the market level. So that's who we had in attendance back at the end of January.
Awesome. Well, I've been connecting with ACS since 2014 when I was the Relay for Life lead in Ireland, coming to Relay summits in the States. Yeah. And since 2016, I've been working with ACS, bringing our partners to either to meetings or connecting with ACS. And the feedback I saw firsthand, but the feedback I also get is just how much volunteer engagement we get at ACS. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about how we create that volunteerism, that ethos, that kind of ACS family. How do you do that? What does that look like at ACS?
It's such a great question. I think what we do at ACS that's maybe unique and different from other nonprofit organizations is what we call the volunteer staff partnership. So our volunteers are really in partnership with our staff, with our team members that work at the ACS. So each partner in that role has, they have different roles and responsibilities. And that's not to say that either party is more or less important than the other one. It's just different. Really, we like our staff members to be the experts on the American Cancer Society, to know the guidelines and the policies and the regulations and things like that. But our volunteers are really the community experts. So it is in working with partnership between the staff person and the volunteer that we can really make that magic happen. So we really do rely on volunteers, not only for more transactional volunteerism, where a volunteer is providing a service to us when it's needed, but really that strategic thought leadership. We have our national board of directors, as well as ACS CAN, our advocacy arm, has a national board of directors. Then, as I mentioned, we've got area boards who are led by a board of directors at that level. And then, of course, with some of our product and program events like Relay for Life, Making Strides Against Breast Cancer, those are led by both a national strategic work group and also, at the local level, a local committee. And so it's really that unique partnership between the staff and volunteers, I think, that have allowed us to be so successful for more than 110 years now. And it's really part of why our legacy is so important and why we can reach so many communities, because we really do rely on volunteers to be the voice of community and the subject matter expert in what they're doing in their towns and cities across the country.
Right. Well, as you're talking, the word that comes to me is empowerment. It's that true ownership and that true decision making that happens versus asking a volunteer, hey, can you do this specific job for me? Well, that's asking someone to do something versus, hey, we have this challenge or this problem.
Yeah.
How would you solve that? That brings them in and brings them into that whole idea of creating the solution. And then once you create a solution, you want to solve it as well. So I think it's just about, being brave enough or having the understanding as well. I often talk about bringing volunteers in and setting a combined vision, so you both have the same end goal in mind, so that you can be sure that no one's going to go off in some odd direction. So I'm really glad to hear that's the way we do things. What I also would love to talk to you a bit about, and we have a lot of conversations with our partners about the changes in volunteerism over recent years. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, because I think sort of through the 90s and the early 2000s, it was very much about create a role, give that position to that person, give them a term time, and they run with it, and then they roll off and someone else comes on. Has that changed? And are you seeing motivations around volunteerism changing? Like, why are people coming to us? Has that changed from previously?
Yeah, absolutely. I love to think about that. I mean, I started at the American Cancer Society in 2005, and so I know exactly what you're talking about. We used to joke that we called it Relay for Life because we expected you to be in this for life, right? Like once you got on, you weren't ever going to get back off. And I definitely think that we've seen a change from those legacy roles. I think back even in the US to, the 1950s, the 1980s, people really served on a committee or they served on a board, and they expected to do that for a year or 2 years or many years in some cases. And I think, just in the past, probably 10 or 15 years, we've seen a real shift to what I like to think of. And, we hear kind of economists talk about this in the business world as the gig economy, where people want to do something as a gig, maybe for 3 months, 6 months, and then move on to something else that's important to them. I think we're seeing that with, millennials and Gen Z in their professional lives with the jobs that they keep. It's very unheard of, I think, for a young professional to stay with a company for 5, 10, 15, 19 years as I've been, because I think that they're just always kind of looking for what's next for them personally, professionally. And so I think that we're seeing that play out in volunteerism as well. So I think a learning that we as volunteer professionals can take from that is really rethinking some of our legacy volunteer roles, breaking them down into more bite-sized pieces that people can do, maybe it's a one-time project that when they're done with the project, they can go and do something different. Maybe it's a 3-month role rather than a 2-year role. So it's really understanding what the volunteer is looking for and how we can adjust the work that needs to get done to suit that volunteer's time commitment, level of interest, skills, and experience, and that sort of thing. You asked a good question about what's bringing people. I think for the American Cancer Society, we know that everybody's been affected by cancer. And I'm sure many of our global cancer partners are seeing that as well. And so I think that if we can offer a variety of roles that allow everybody to serve and everybody to make a difference in whatever way works for their lives, with their personal and professional skills, I think that's where we see a lot of success, is not saying, you have to be in this role for 2 years and these are the things that you're going to be doing, but coming to a volunteer and saying, you have these wonderful skills, or we've seen you out in the business community or in the local community leadership and know that you are really skilled in this area. Would you come and help us tackle this project? And as soon as you're done with the project, we can find something else for you to do, or you can go on and move to a different charity or a different organization. So I think it's really about meeting that volunteer where they are and adding value to what they want to do to bring support to our mission. I also think it's really important to think about, what is that mission? What are we trying to accomplish? And how, making sure that our volunteers are aligned to our mission objectives. So a volunteer may want to do a fantastic idea that, would add a lot of value for the cancer community. But if it doesn't align for our American Cancer Society priorities, it's probably best that we rehome them, into a different organization that's more aligned with their vision, because then that serves the greater cancer community. It serves that volunteer, and it allows us to focus on what our priorities here within the organization.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I hear a lot of the word project coming up there, and I think that's something we're seeing globally, is this idea of giving people a project versus a role specifically, and having that trust that when the project finishes, maybe the volunteer goes to do something else in another organization or our own organization, but when something else comes up, that they can come back to you as well. And so I think that's really what I'm seeing in the work that I'm doing. I also wanted to ask you about communities, because I feel like community is shifting. Obviously in the old days, community was kind of the 1 or 2 mile radius of your house or where you lived or where you worked. And, the internet and access to multimedia is transforming that, I feel, so that we identify in a different way, and that maybe community is perhaps more about our interests versus our geography. I'd love to hear your thoughts around community and community volunteering.
Yeah, I love to think about that. I think really the pandemic probably just like fast forwarded something that I think we were already seeing in terms of volunteerism. We have so many virtual volunteer roles now that can be done from anywhere. They can be done on your own time. They can be done, whether you live in a large city or a small town. And so I think that's really important. We can also bring together these volunteers in virtual ways. And so I think we've seen a real trend towards, getting volunteers together in a virtual space, whether that's a virtual meeting like on Zoom or something, or putting them together even asynchronously, like in a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group or something online where they can connect and collaborate in those ways. Interestingly, some of those same tools we're actually able to use at the actual real life community level, right? So here at ACS, we're working on some collaboration tools that will allow our community volunteers who are geographically based to be able to share and collaborate and work on projects and ideas together. And so I think it's interesting to think about how those ideas are all coming together in different ways. But you're totally right. You don't have to live in a certain place to volunteer anymore. If you have the time and the skill set to help, there's probably a way that you can get involved with American Cancer Society or with any of our global cancer partners as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think our big challenge in the fundraising team is to work out how do we bring communities together and raise money, because previously, like Relay, you're bringing your geographical community together and you're inspiring them and you're raising money. Whereas now with that kind of disparate people across the country or around the world connecting, how do we leverage that? How do we motivate them with our cause and then ask them to donate? So I don't know if you have further thoughts on that or if there's any breakthroughs, but it's certainly the challenge that a lot of partners are facing right now.
I think it is a challenge, but I think it's an opportunity as well. I think social media has connected us in new and different ways. And, it can be a great thing. It can be a terrible thing, certainly. Right. But I love seeing so many of our volunteers put their fundraisers on social media, whether that's Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, and just see the unique and different ideas that they have. I think it is an opportunity to reach out. Maybe you wouldn't have called on your family members or your friends that were half a country away 15 years ago, but now they're going to see your social media post, and we make it very easy, I think, to share those ideas and get people to engage with the mission. And it doesn't have to be just in your community. It can be something that you do for a loved one, right? And then you can reach out to friends and family members who also cared about that person or care about that person and get them engaged in fundraising as well. So yeah, I think it is a challenge, but definitely try to look at it as an opportunity for sure.
So true. So true. One last question for you then, and a topic that just popped in my head is about age stratification. I think we all have this idea in our head that traditionally it's kind of the middle-aged, older white women who are volunteering for cancer charities in the US and the UK where I grew up, Australia where I've worked. How does our age stratification and also, I guess, our ethnic diversity look in American Cancer Society volunteerism right now?
Yeah, what a great question. I think that I know at ACS, we're definitely seeing more of a trend. We understand that diverse voices bring diverse ideas, and it really is going to take all of us, to end cancer as we know it for everyone, which is the mission of the American Cancer Society. And so there has been a really innovative and I think a really intentional push to engage diverse geographies, diverse people, diverse skill sets in our mission, because we know that it can't just be, some of those legacy volunteers where we all look the same. We bring different ideas and we bring different perspectives and life experiences. So I think at American Cancer Society, we certainly are seeing, just more diverse individuals with diverse backgrounds. We're also seeing more of a trend to young professionals. And I think we have some real opportunities. At ACS, we've got high school, upper school, college events. And how do we trend those volunteers into a community event and then into a leadership role? So I love thinking about how we can kind of career path these volunteers from, getting involved when they're maybe in elementary school or in their teens through college and then out into their careers as they begin their jobs in the real world, as we say. So I definitely think we are seeing a diversity of ages, a diversity of ethnicities, and really a diversity of skill sets as well, which is going to be so important as we move into the American Cancer Society's next 110 years.
I love that conversation and that lifetime value of a volunteer. And even I remember being at school and the charities that came into our schools, I still have an affiliation with those from those early days. And when I'm back in the UK, I never fail to support them. So I think it's a super interesting topic. Kathy, thank you so much for joining today and sharing these insights. It is a conversation that I think we could have for hours and hours and hours, days and weeks. But it's a great to get that insight. I'm going to share this with our network of partners. I'm sure they'll come back with some questions, but I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. Look forward to doing this again soon for sure.
Thanks.